Welcome to tonight's live stream. And wow, do I have a lot for you tonight. Hang on to your hats because we are about to go on one of the wildest legal rides we have ever seen because Lori Vallow Daybell doesn't care anymore. It's the third and very likely the final trial for Lori Vallow Daybell. And there is serious question about whether the judge can keep her in control. So Lori is not really speaking to the judge, and she's violating court rules, which is especially bad because representing herself, acting as her own lawyer. She just filed a motion to kick the judge off the case. Again, it's at least her third motion to do that. Her claim in this case is very different and much wilder than what she has claimed in any other case. This time, she is suggesting that the victim, Brandon Boudreaux, made up the whole shooting, and she's being framed for a crime, not only a crime that she didn't commit, but a crime that no one committed. So the stakes are incredibly high. Lori is accused of conspiracy to murder again. It involves shocking claims that people Lori knows, even her own children, were inhabited by evil spirits and became zombies. And these very people began dropping like flies over a bloody 6-month period in 2019. Let me look over here. I need to make sure that I have good connection. I'm not really any complaints, so hopefully we're all good. Oh, wait, there we go. There's my yes. Okay, great. So Lori already is serving 3 life sentences without parole, plus some years tacked on to that in Idaho for killing her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, and her 7-year-old autistic son, JJ. Now, she's also been sentenced. Let me change that. She's also been convicted for conspiring with her brother to murder her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. And there's even another murder in there. There is the conspiracy to murder Tammy Daybell, her husband Chad's, her present husband Chad's ex, now deceased wife. There we go. So she's going to be sentenced for Charles Vallow's crime after this trial concludes. She hasn't been sentenced yet on that. And so this is Lori Vallow Daybell's swan song, almost certainly. We can talk a little bit about appeal, but almost certainly this is it, her very last trial. So she is now accused in an Arizona court of conspiring with her brother to murder Brandon Boudreaux, who was her niece's husband. She's not a lawyer, and she is representing herself in a murder case. It is absolute lunacy. The good news in this case is that at least this particular victim did survive. Someone shot at Brandon, but they missed. Now, Lori pushed for a speedy trial, saying she wanted out of the hellhole Arizona prison and back, apparently, far more civilized prisons in Idaho. But now that the final trial is here, she seems anything but happy to be in court, having her day in court as she wanted. Jury selection was delayed on Friday when she said she was sick. And then it was canceled again on Monday and Tuesday. But by Wednesday, the judge ordered her to be there, and he had the prison evaluate her for medical issues. The prison said, yeah, she's not that sick. So she's almost on strike today. That would be sort of my read of it, just like, I'm really not going to speak to all unless it's a sidebar. And so when he speaks to her, she doesn't really respond. She just keeps her head down and says nothing. Normally in the trial, as it went last time, she would stand up and say, well, Your Honor, the judge would say, would you like to speak, Ms. Vallow? And she would say, yes, that's right, I would. And she would stand up. But she's just standing up completely silently, goes to the podium. Really different. So first thing I want to do is give an overview of the case, because if you have not been following this case, it may just be the wildest and most bizarre, the most tangled case that you've ever followed. So I want to make sure everybody kind of comes along and follows it and make sure we understand. By the way, would you hit the like button? That'll help the video get out to more people. And if you would subscribe, that'd be great. We'd love to have you back. The first 5 in tonight's chat: Bonbon, RPH, Angel LaFawn, Texas 2 Pugs, Michael Lalonde, and Shiroshina. Special shout out to y'all. And let's get started with who's who in this case. And I'm going to go ahead and make that, put that on the screen for you. All right, right in the center, you see Lori Vallow and her present husband, Chad Daybell. So Lori Vallow is now Lori Vallow Daybell. They're now married. Lori used to be married to Charles Vallow right up until he was killed by her brother. He's the one right above her, Alex Cox. So Lori was married to Charles. Charles was shot by Alex Cox, killed. And then Lori was free to marry Chad, all except a little detail. And that's to the right there. Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife, she was still living. So that was really preventing them from moving forward. So now both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell have also been convicted in the murder of Tammy Daybell. Chad was convicted and is on death row for his role in that. Lori was convicted of conspiring to murder Tammy Daybell. And so who else? We've got Tylee and JJ, the 2 children of Lori, and they were both found buried in Chad Daybell's backyard. Tylee was by another husband of Lori's. JJ was adopted by Lori and her husband, Charles. He was actually Charles's nephew, but adopted. So Brandon Boudreaux is the one whose trial we're going to be dealing with now. And I don't mean the trial of Brandon Boudreaux. I mean the trial about Brandon Boudreaux, because in this unbelievable saga of events, included in that was an allegation we're about to explore now in this trial that Alex Cox, the brother, shot at Brandon Boudreaux. Fortunately, missed, but tried to murder Brandon Boudreaux and just failed. So if you go around, so what we've got is Alex Cox appeared to be involved with a number of the murders and is in fact charged as a conspirator in the death of Brandon Boudreaux and was in the death of Charles. He's deceased, so he's not on trial, can never be on trial. But Brandon Boudreaux will testify at this trial. He's alive. He can come to trial. He did come to trial. He was there today. And Lori Vallow Daybell is on trial for her role in Alex shooting at Brandon Boudreaux. So there we have our, let's go ahead and pull out of that. So that's basically the story, and it's a wild story. So I want to start with the opening statements, which frame what both sides are going to prove in the case. So, and you know, frankly, the Arizona prosecutor can flat tell a story. So I'm going to let her explain the basic outline of what happened. I'm going to put that on the stage now.
Wrangler. The Texas license plate, no rear tire, and dark tint was parked right up next to Brandon Boudreaux's driveway. Idle. At 9:13 a.m. on October 2nd of 2019, Brandon Boudreaux returned home. That Jeep had been idling there already for over an hour. When Brandon turned onto his street, he immediately noticed this Jeep because it was parked so close to his driveway. The Jeep was facing towards him, and he immediately also noticed that there was no rear tire. He saw a Texas plate on the Jeep, and then he saw that back window of the Jeep open up, a rifle barrel come out and point at him. And then bang! He heard a shot and his window shattered right next to him. Brandon hit the accelerator and he took off. He turned the corner and drove a block or so away and stopped, calling 911. He talked to the operator and told them where this Jeep was going. As Brandon was speaking with the 911 operator, he had no idea that that bullet had struck his car just a few inches from his head. You'll learn that in the back of that Jeep was this defendant's brother, Alex Cox. He had been lying in wait with a rifle for Brandon to return home.
Just unhinged, as you can already see. Brandon had just dropped his kids off on a peaceful weekday morning. He had dropped some at school. One he had dropped off with his wife, now estranged wife. They were going through a divorce. Why on earth would anyone be lying in wait to shoot Brandon Boudreaux? And why would Alex Cox, of all people? What does any of that also, here's another big question, what does any of that have to do with Lori Vallow Daybell? Because unless the prosecutor can hook everything back to Lori Vallow Daybell, then all of this is going to be irrelevant. She can't be convicted of this. So here is the evidence that the prosecutor says she's going to present about this. She starts with how Lori knew Brandon Boudreaux, the victim. And she talked about how Lori was exceptionally close to her niece, Melanie Boudreaux, who was married to Brandon.
In June of 2019, Brandon Boudreaux was still married to his then wife, Melanie. You're going to learn that Melanie is this defendant's niece. You're going to learn they were very close. And you're going to learn that they both had it out for Brandon. On June 25th, Brandon and Melanie got into an argument. And Brandon learned that this defendant had told his wife that he was gay, that he had hacked into her computer, and that Brandon was trying to work with her then husband to take her temple recommend away.
So let's stop and talk about that a minute, because if you haven't been following the case, you're probably thinking, what, a temple recommend? What are they talking about? Well, we know from prior trials that at this very time, in fact, someone is trying to take away Lori Vallow Daybell's temple recommend. Maybe not Brandon, but that is something that Lori's own husband and that her brother are trying to do. So what's a temple recommend? Well, they are all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the temple recommend allows some special privileges, some entrance to people who hold it. It's sort of like a certificate in good standing, I would say. Well, Lori Vallow Daybell was very religious. Her husband and her brother believed too much so. And they felt like maybe they could get her off this sort of crazed bench she was on if they could just get the temple recommend revoked and have her lower the religiosity that was sort of intruding in her life and that they felt was causing her to act bizarrely. So they were trying to take it away, but that was trial number 2. That was the Charles Vallow issue. Brandon texted Lori to tell her, these things you're telling my wife, Melanie, your niece, these are lies. I'm not gay. I'm not doing any of these things. Well, Lori never responded. Within a few weeks after that, Melanie and Brandon, the victim, were separated and they were headed toward divorce, a very bitter divorce. And on July 11th is when the first death occurred. That was Charles Vallow, Lori's estranged husband, who was killed when he came to pick up his son. Lori had their adopted child, JJ, and Charles came to pick up JJ. At the time, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, was there in the house, and he shot and killed Charles Vallow. The prosecutor did not tell the jury about this shooting. She just called it the incident on July 11th. She referred to it, but she did not actually describe what happened. We will see whether or not they get that into evidence or even try to get that into evidence. Let's hear a little bit more about what she says.
You're going to hear about an incident that occurred on July 11th of 2019 in Chandler involving Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. The Chandler police were out at this defendant's residence, and they took photographs of some vehicles. One of those vehicles was a 2018 Jeep Wrangler with Texas license plates, LWD 0997. That will be very important to you.
All right, let's stop and take the story a little bit further. In August, Lori and her brother Alex, remember her estranged husband is now deceased, so she and her brother to Rexburg, Idaho, where Lori could be near, guess who? Chad Daybell. Chad, she was having an affair with him. They would soon marry. He was married at that moment to his wife, Tammy, but Tammy would soon die as well. And that's the fourth murder. Fourth murder. So I'm getting ahead of myself there. Meanwhile, back in Arizona, Melanie, the niece, and Brandon, her estranged husband, both get new places to live. Brandon rented a place on September 13th, and nobody knew about it except 4 friends. and Melanie, who asked him for his new address. And that is going to be critically important. The fact that Melanie asked for the new address.
You will see a text message that Melanie asked Brandon for his new address. They had children in common, so he didn't think anything of this. And he sent her the address. That was on September 17th. And so,
let's stop. Brandon actually moved into his house, the rented house, a little earlier than planned. Melanie dangled in front of him the idea that maybe he could get a little extra time with his kids. He hadn't been getting a lot of time with them. And she said, hey, I'm going out of town for the weekend. I could give you an extra weekend with the kids if you want. So he went ahead and moved straight into his house eagerly so he could get it set up and be ready to take care of the kids. And guess where Melanie was going? Rexburg, Idaho, where Lori and Alex had just moved and where Chad Daybell lived. That was, in their belief system in the small group, the center, the place where all of the believers would gather in the final days. And they were going to Rexburg to be there at the epicenter. They believed they were going to lead people in the end times, that they would be the leaders who would work with Jesus to gather the final 144,000. Long story, we'll get into that another night. So the prosecutor says that Alex drove Lori's Jeep from Rexburg down to Arizona. And he did that in order to shoot and kill Brandon Boudreaux. And then so the prosecutor is going to offer some evidence about what the plan was. And one of the first things she offers is she explains that Alex Cox got the windows of the Jeep tinted dark.
On September 25th, Alex Cox took that Jeep to Dan's window tinting in Rexburg, Idaho, and he paid $200 to put some of the darkest tint you could put on it. You'll see those photos of what that Jeep looked like afterwards. This is the first action of this defendant, Lori Vallow, in the conspiracy, loaning her brother this Jeep and allowing him to put on these dark tint to get it ready so he can lie in wait, and no one could see him in the back with that rifle.
So next, they bought burner phones. Not next, I guess it would even be before. They tinted the windows and they bought the burner phones, Alex and Lori together. And they did that, according to the prosecutor, thinking they were about to get away with something. They were going to use these burner phones so they could never be traced back to Lori or to Alex. But they made two critical and fatal mistakes when they did that. Now, let me say to Shards of Words, who has been a member for 5 months. That's awesome. We are glad to have you. And please, I completely agree with Shards of Words. Hit that like button, y'all. That'll really help the video. I would appreciate it a great deal. And thank you, Michael. I appreciate your super chat very much. All right, so let's keep going on what the two fatal mistakes that Lori and Alex made were when they bought these burner phones.
Burner phone is a phone that you don't have to put your subscriber information to. And so how do we know that Alex Cox was there and Lori Vallow was there? Well, you're going to learn that each had their own cell phone, like most of us do, and that Alex Cox's cell phone was utilizing Wi-Fi inside that Walmart at the time that burner phone was purchased with cash. And you'll learn that this defendant's cell phone that was subscribed to her was utilizing cell towers in the area of that Walmart at the time that that burner phone was purchased. Lori Vallow and Alex Cox knew that he would need a phone when he drove down here, but they knew you don't want to bring your own phone. You'll be tracked, right? So they bought this burner phone so that Alex would have contact while he drove down here and away. But Alex made a mistake. Because like any other phone, you can still use a burner phone to access Google or your Gmail accounts. And you're going to learn that Alex accessed his Gmail account. In this investigation, you'll learn the police executed many, many search warrants, and one of them was on Alex Cox's Gmail account, homerjmaximus@gmail.com. You're going to learn that Alex searched for things like window tinting in Rexburg, that he searched for places to practice shooting ranges. You're going to learn that he searched different things about angles or trajectories of shots.
So those were both mistakes, that they were both able to, that they both were tracked near that Walmart, and then that they continued, Alex continued to use that phone and was tracked all down to Arizona. But there was a much bigger mistake that Alex made on top of that. And that was that he connected him to Brandon Boudreaux in one particular search that he did, because the first searches, that would only get him down to Arizona. But this actually connects him right to Brandon Boudreaux.
You're going to learn that the day before, on October 1st and the morning of October 2nd, he searched 3875 East Phelps Street, where Brandon Boudreaux lived. You're going to learn that after the shooting, Alex Cox actually searched for directions on how to get away through a back road, how to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler.
Oh, sorry, let me stop and tell you. So now there's also a mistake that Lori made. Now, she also made important searches on her vehicle. And one was, how do you get the back seat out of your Jeep Wrangler? The reason that's important because law enforcement believes they took the seat out of the Jeep Wrangler so that Alex Cox could look out the back window while holding the gun. And so they removed it so he would have plenty of room back there. There are two problems. Lori Vallow Daybell is going to be captured on video putting that seat from the Jeep Wrangler, or one that sure looks like it, into a storage unit on the exact day. And she's also going to be caught doing a search about how to remove the back seat.
Also searched a YouTube video, Jeep Wrangler JK rear seat removal, how to DIY YouTube video. This defendant continued to be a co-conspirator and to aid her accomplice, Alex Cox, by searching how to remove that back seat of the Jeep so he could better lie in wait to shoot Brandon.
So I can see that our video is really glitching. You can hear it, but I can see that the video isn't really keeping up. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying a new method, and obviously I don't have all the kinks worked out, so I'll have to keep working on that. So the prosecutors also said that Lori kept Alex's phone with her, and she did that in order to give him an alibi. If his phone stayed in Rexburg with her, then how could anyone accuse him of having been in Arizona shooting Brandon Boudreaux?
Alex Cox's phone remained with this defendant. Meanwhile, that burner phone from that Idaho Falls Walmart on September 30th started moving towards Arizona. You will hear that on October 2nd of 2019, at about 8 in the morning Arizona time, about an hour before the shooting, this defendant created the alibi. She had Alex Cox's phone call her phone to make it look like he was still in Rexburg, Idaho, instead of in Gilbert, Arizona. That fake call lasted about 24 minutes. Both of those cell phones were using the same cell tower in Rexburg, Idaho.
Now, the police tracked Lori's Jeep being driven by Alex Cox, the prosecutors believe, tracked that Jeep all the way. They found it in Arizona. The prosecutor, as I mentioned, also has video of Lori going to actually place the seat and the tire from the rear of that Jeep into a storage unit in Idaho.
She goes to a storage unit in Rexburg, Idaho, and rents unit C52. The next day, on October 2nd, when the shooting is happening down in Arizona, or after the shooting actually, she brings her soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell, with her. And you will see video of this as she and Chad Daybell put the rear tire and the rear bench seat of that Jeep into the storage unit. Using the storage unit for that Jeep tire and that bench seat so that her co-conspirator, Alex, could lie in wait in the back of the Jeep, waiting for Brandon to return home that morning. Alex.
And even worse than that, they also have video of Lori taking all of that out after Alex returns to Rexburg. So honestly, Brandon got really, really lucky, far luckier than the other victims in this case, all of whom ended up dead.
One shot. Luckily, he did not hit Brandon. You will see that Brandon was driving a Tesla at the time. And unlike many cars, there's no frame around the window. The window just goes into the door, into the car itself. The shot hit the frame of the vehicle, but right where the window goes up into it. And you'll see that there is damage to the window, as well as the bullet hole into the frame of the vehicle itself, right above Brandon's head when he was sitting in that driver's seat. You'll hear that when Brandon took off, the window remained in the door, that he drove away and then eventually circled back around and went into his driveway. You'll hear that for a Tesla, when you put the car in park, the door automatically opens and the whole window just shattered out.
And they've already put in a picture of exactly that. The Tesla sitting there with a broken window on the ground beside it. Brandon immediately told the police, go look at Alex and Lori. It wasn't like he thought about it. And it was Alex and Lori. Go look at Alex and Lori. Now, the police also have evidence that we're going to see about gunshot residue in the back of the Jeep, which they say is because Alex was sitting in the back of the Jeep with this rifle so that he could shoot Brandon Boudreaux. And now we get to the interesting part, Lori's opening, because it was wild. There were more objections than I've ever seen in every opening statement, all put together. It is sort of a cardinal rule that you do not make, and I'll go ahead and pull this out for a minute. It's just a rule among lawyers that you don't object to the other side during opening or closing. Unless there is some horrible thing that the person does, you just don't do that. You just don't object. Now, Lori, of course, is not an attorney, and she is not following the rules that would normally be followed by attorneys. And the result was that there were more objections than I have ever seen. I was initially concerned because I honestly think they have a very strong case. It's going to be difficult for the prosecution to lose this case unless the jury gets upset with them, feels like they're picking on her and being mean to her. And if that happens, then all bets are off, because then they may believe her and not believe what the prosecution has to say. So, but it went on so far. I think it went well beyond that. And so I could understand. We'll get into all of that. Let's go ahead and watch some more about this.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, here we are at trial. And the judicial system can be difficult to understand at times. There are laws and rules and statutes that govern how things will proceed in this trial. You yesterday got to hear the preliminary jury instructions, so you kind of got an order of how things are going to go. In order for someone to be charged with a crime, as I have been...
Your Honor, I'm going to object to argument versus an opening statement.
I'll remind the defendant, an opening statement should be a preview of what is to be expected at trial. So go ahead.
Do you see how she keeps her head down and she carefully avoids acknowledging the judge in any way? It's like, okay, when you finish speaking, I will begin speaking again. I think basically her plan from now on is that she is going to say what she wants to say, what she believes she needs to say, and all bets are off. I think that's where we're going from here. Now, I did at this stage, I wondered, why is the prosecutor objecting? I mean, all she said so far is very mild. There are laws and rules and statutes that govern how we will proceed in trial. You got to hear the preliminary jury instruction. You got an order of what's happening. Who cares, really? I mean, none of that is even important. I certainly wouldn't object to that because none of that is going to prejudice or bias a jury. It's just sort of informational. It may not be relevant, but I probably wouldn't have objected at that point. So that was the part at which I was thinking, well, gosh, I don't know. I think the prosecutor may be objecting more because it goes on. This is, by the way, just clips. I'm not giving you the whole opening so that we have time to talk about it and still keep it in a reasonably short period of time.
That law enforcement presents evidence that they gather, and the state prosecutors are going to present that to you. Sometimes the state charges a defendant with a crime. They have charged me with a crime, a very serious crime. Sometimes they take the allegations to a grand jury to decide if the defendant should be charged.
I'm going to object again, Your Honor. Improper
That's,
argument. Asked to strike.
Hold on. The jury should disregard that last comment. How the charges arrived here are not for the jury's consideration.
So here, what I'm guessing was about to happen is Lori was about to say, and they didn't even take my charges to the grand jury. And she's sort of setting up a description as if she's being prosecuted without the regular rules and laws having been followed. So that's where there's a little bit more of a reason here. There are a lot of objections in between, but you can see here's another one. And Now she's going to start talking more about the law.
Conspiracy is an ancient word that appears in the Bible on many occasions. Judas conspired against Jesus with the chief priests for
I'm going to
30 pieces of silver.
object to, unless this was being presented at trial, I'm not sure that this is appropriate opening.
What is the legal objection?
Well, you're arguing. The opening statement is not argument. I'm going to allow it briefly, but I may cut you off depending on where you're going with that.
Again, does it really matter? She's talking about, the definition of conspiracy, what it means. So, again, sort of mild, but you can see why the prosecutor is upset as the opening statement goes on and on. Now, the difference between them is an opening statement is supposed to, it really, you can, and some lawyers do, start every sentence with the evidence will show blah, blah. The evidence will show this. The evidence will show that. And to explain to the jury, to give them a roadmap of where the evidence will go. Argument, the more passionate plea to the jury to do something in particular, that happens at the end. It happens in closing argument. That's why the beginning is called opening statement, not opening argument, but just statement. And at the end is called closing argument, because then you are allowed to argue. So Lori is doing something pretty different, but so far there hasn't really been anything that would be prejudicial or anything. And I wrote down, don't overdo objections, that you do not, as a prosecutor, she's not going to want the jury to feel sorry for Lori Vallow Daybell like she's being attacked by everybody. So Lori's just been told that they're going to allow it briefly, the judge will, but here she keeps going.
Cain conspired against Abel, his brother. This case is a case of conspiracy. The charge against me is that I conspired with my brother, Alex Cox, to murder my niece's husband, Brandon Boudreaux. But you will find, as you begin to see the evidence put forth in this case, that there was not any animosity between Brandon and myself. I personally did not have any motivation to have harm come to Brandon. In fact, Brandon and I had a very friendly relationship all of the time that I have known him. I first met Brandon when he was marrying my niece, Melanie.
And Your Honor, I'm going to object to, unless the defendant's testifying.
We spent holidays together and shared.
Okay, so here the prosecutor is getting into a spot where she really has to object right here, because this is straight up testifying. Lori did not take the stand in the last case for the murder of Charles Vallow, her husband at the time. And who knows whether she will or won't decide to take the stand in this case. But this is a very reasonable objection. And at this point, the judge actually called a bench conference to try to explain to Lori that this is an opening statement. You can't be making an argument, and you aren't allowed to testify. That's not your role. If you want to testify later, you can. All you can talk about is what the evidence will show. And so, but despite all that, she's now told the jury, I was really close to Melanie. I was great friends with Brandon. I had no motive, as if she had been able to say that while testifying. So at this point, insisted she was not Brandon's enemy, and she kept going despite the bench conference.
In everyday life. I was there for Melanie and Brandon's wedding and for the birth of all 4 of their children. I was also very close to all 4 of their children. In this case, you will hear Brandon himself tell you that someone shot a gun at his car. You will learn in this testimony that Brandon was not hurt. You will learn that he wasn't even sure what had happened. But you will hear that Brandon immediately blamed me, which begs the question, was I an enemy to Brandon? That is news to me, and hopefully by the end of this trial, we will all have some answers to that question.
So she hinted that there may be one particular argument that she has that might actually be pretty strong, pretty deep, that some of this got the color of the Jeep wrong. Maybe even Brandon himself changed the story about what color the Jeep was. Now, her argument is going to be, I presume, that Brandon did that because he wanted to make sure he framed Lori. And when he got the Jeep color wrong, then he said, oh, yeah, let me change that. Here's what Lori's argument was.
In this case, you will learn that Brandon had called 911 and Gilbert police did respond. You will learn that Brandon speaks of a puke green Jeep. And then he offers the officers a camo green color that he's speaking of on his phone. He says a green Jeep. Then you will hear the neighbor who says that it was a dark blue Jeep that was parked in front of the neighbor's house. You will find out that after that event, he quickly changed his story from a camo green Jeep to a gray Jeep.
And that event was meeting with one of the investigators.
You will then learn that Brandon continued to provide information he was personally finding out to Detective Pillar, the case agent in this case. You will learn that Detective Pillar and Brandon discussed through email how they can demonstrate Melanie's financial gain if Brandon were to have died around October 2nd, 2019. This is what a conspiracy looks like. Two people trying to set up another person for a crime.
And she's turning it on its head, saying the conspiracy was to set me up, and the conspiracy was between Brandon Boudreaux and the investigator, not between Alex Cox and me. I wasn't trying to kill Brandon Boudreaux. Instead, Brandon was trying to set me up. Now, Lori hits on a hot button that has frankly puzzled a lot of people who have followed this case, which is, why is Lori charged and Melanie, the ex-wife, now ex-wife, has never been charged for this? I'm going to break that down in another video, I think, but let's listen to what Lori said when she hit this hot button issue.
My niece, Melanie Boudreaux, is named by the state as a co-conspirator. However, she has not been charged with the crime.
I'm going to object
but
and
I
have that
have.
struck as well, Your Honor.
The jury should disregard that statement. You're going to receive an instruction later that all persons that may be involved would not necessarily be charged or called as witnesses, and you'll follow those instructions later. Go ahead.
I was not living in Arizona at the time this alleged incident happened on October 2nd, 2019. I was not even aware such an event had taken place. I did have a close relationship with my brother Alex, but I was not aware of his every move.
You see how that's testifying? She's saying, I wasn't aware. I didn't know this. But if she doesn't literally take the stand, then that's just a statement. It's not actually evidence, because nothing the lawyers say or here Lori says in opening is evidence. But she's throwing it in and she's speaking for it for herself.
Melanie also had a close relationship with Alex, but also was not aware of his location at all times. Brandon and Alex also had a good relationship until this accusation. They saw each other frequently at all of our family parties and get-togethers and would often be seen laughing and talking.
So you can see how she's offering her own opinions, her own testimony. We were all close. We all got along. We had parties together. It was only Brandon's paranoia, Brandon's charges against me that caused all of this happy group to splinter.
Alex was a comedian who kept our family laughing. Alex passed away in December 2019 of natural causes, so he is not here to defend himself.
And I'm going to object again to that as well, since he's not party to this.
All
He's
right,
not here.
I'll just remind the jury that what is said in opening statements is not evidence. It's not sworn testimony.
So look what she just got in there. There was a finding that Alex Cox died of natural causes. Many people who follow the case find that hard to believe. They question whether or not his conveniently timed death was somehow orchestrated by Lori and Chad, or whether it truly was, in fact, as the autopsy report said, just a death of natural causes. So Lori has now put that out in front of the jury that Alex died of natural causes. That didn't come in through any kind of evidence. There's no person showed up at trial. She just made that statement to the jury. And that's why the prosecutor is upset about that. I think one of the problems is she doesn't care anymore, and she's going to put in evidence whenever she wants to. Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate your super chat and your nice
Please
comment.
proceed.
Although the state has alleged that there are several co-conspirators in this case, I am the only one being charged with a crime. So you will be the judge. You will hear and see evidence presented by the state. The state has, according to the law, 100% burden to prove to you
I'm
that
going
a
to object to misstatement
crime-
of the law in terms of 100%.
All right. Again, this is a little bit bordering on argument, but the jury will receive the instructions on what is and what is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Do you see how it depends on what the jury understands or how they follow this? But you can see where this constant, the prosecutor objects and the judge jumps in on her side. The one thing both the prosecutor and the judge must avoid is any sort of appearance there in the courtroom that they are ganging up on little Lori, who is not a lawyer, and that she doesn't have the ability even to counter the kinds of that power that's pushed down on her from both the judge and the prosecutor. So they've really got to be cautious about that. But she's pushing the rules so hard, I think that they're not really sure what to do. The prosecutor is just, she's going to keep objecting because she's concerned about it. Now, what was she worried about here? She was worried about that phrase, the prosecution has a 100% burden to prove to you that crime. On the one hand, it's true that 100% of the time, the prosecution has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's not guilty 100%. It's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so the prosecutor is a little worried that the jury may get that standard turned around if she doesn't fix it right now. Lori has a very unique argument here. She is going to argue, apparently, that Brandon Boudreaux made up this whole shooting. Maybe there was no shooting at all. Brandon just did this himself in order to frame Lori. Shades of Karen Reed.
I want you to look carefully and determine if this event was a crime at all. Did a shooting actually occur? Only Brandon claims that it did. Only Brandon names me and Alex. You will learn that Brandon himself did own a gun. You will learn that Brandon knew how to shoot his gun. You will learn that Brandon and Melanie were going through a divorce. And you will learn that even though Brandon is the one who actually filed for a divorce, he was blaming me for his divorce. You will learn that the information that the Gilbert Police Department and Detective Pillar, the case agent on this case, learned about me and my brother Alex was from Brandon Boudreaux. You will learn that Brandon and Detective Pillar communicated frequently and were on a first-name basis. I want you to look closely at the motivation of Brandon and the Gilbert Police Department, because I'm the only one charged with the crime, and I need you to decipher what really happened here, because I'm the only one who's being asked to pay a consequence for this crime.
Again, Your Honor, I'm going to ask to object and strike that.
Sustained. The jury, in their instructions, received an instruction that said the jury is not to consider a penalty. That will be in the final instructions area as well. The jury's job is to determine whether or not the state has proved the case beyond a reasonable doubt or the charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Go ahead, proceed.
You see it once again, Lori Vallow Daybell not acknowledging the judge. She just stares downward, waiting for him to finish talking. I think that's a very dismissive sort of approach, like, whatever you say, I'm going to continue doing what I have planned. Feel free to talk, but I'm not going to change anything I'm doing. That's how I read it. You tell me what you think in the comments. I think she's just planning to take the lumps that the judge dishes out, and she's going to move forward.
You will hear many references during this trial about the state versus Lori Daybell. Well, who is the state? The state are the prosecutors.
I object to argument and relevance.
Sustained.
And you, the jury, are brought in to stand between the state and me.
And I'm going to object again to improper statement of the law, argument and relevance.
Sustained.
And
you are here to say.
Let's stop for just a minute. Lori said exactly that. I mean, nearly word for word in the Charles Vallow trial, and she was told that was improper. It's not like this is a surprise. She is not unknowing. She knows she's not supposed to say this.
If a crime has even been committed at all. You are here to say if I committed this very crime and if the state proved this to you beyond a reasonable doubt. If at the end of this trial you have reasonable doubt, then I remain innocent. But you will in fact witness a power struggle between the state and the defendant.
Your Honor,
for what a fact really is.
Sustained.
Because they want to convince you, the jury, that a fact is speculation, that a fact is innuendo, that a fact is insinuation, that they knew what I was thinking, what I was feeling, what I was planning, when they don't know it all. You, the jury, have all the power to decide what the facts are and what they're not. Not the state, not the judge, not law enforcement, you. So I implore you to listen carefully and decide for yourselves if the state's theory really makes logical sense. What motivation did I have? What malice have I ever shown to anyone? What benefit would I gain? I am a person who loves all people and has no malice towards anyone, not even the prosecutors who wrongfully try to convict me.
Your Honor, I'm going to object again to relevance and to argument.
Sustained.
I am all about spreading love and will continue to do so, even after this trial is complete, no matter the result. Thank you.
The Jeep
Okay, we have got to talk about that last bit right there. Let me remove that and so we can talk about that. So let's go over that again. Here's what she said. What benefit, what malice have I ever shown to anyone? Of course, there are now 2 separate juries who believe she has shown malice toward at least 4 people, and they have found her guilty of murder or conspiring to murder 4 people. What benefit would I gain? I'm a person who loves all people and has no malice towards anyone, not even the prosecutors who wrongfully try to convict me. Again, 2 juries already disagree with her that she had malice toward other people and, in fact, guilty in murder or conspiracy to murder. And so the prosecutor objects. I don't even know if she should have. She should have argued, I believe she's opened the door to findings that she, in fact, acted with malice, to findings that she murdered other people, because right now I don't believe any of that will come in. What exactly the judge will deem admissible over the course of the trial. But right now, I don't think any of that is relevant. The prosecutor could have argued that this opened the door, that this was an example of what Lori was saying that would now open the door for her to be able to put some of the murder information in. But Trina K was very cautious, and I think she should be. She has not that I know I've asked for that yet. But we keep going. I am all about spreading love and will continue to do so even after this trial is complete, no matter the result. Not that that's a bad sentiment, but it's just very, very ironic. Already moved into the first 3 witnesses. Brandon Boudreaux has testified. He told the story. He has not been cross-examined, though, because of the fact that Lori Vallow Daybell was waiting for some information from her investigator, and for some reason, no one could get hold of him. So they put that off for Lori to be able to cross-examine him later. There was Robert Abado Marca, who rented a nearby house and talked about having seen the same Jeep that Brandon Boudreaux testified was there. In other words, Brandon wasn't making it up. Brandon didn't shoot his own Tesla and then frame Lori for it. Instead, there really was a Jeep and he really was shot. And then Nolan McDermott of the Gilbert police, who came to the scene and said, yep, I saw a hole right there in the vehicle. So that's what we've heard today. That's who we've heard from. I want to talk for just a minute about how incredibly dangerous Lori Vallow Daybell is. And I don't mean in terms of murders and conspiracy, although obviously that's a pretty big deal. I am talking about dangerous as a defendant because she has nothing to lose. And I think she is starting to realize that. I think with her second trial, the Charles Vallow trial, she seemed to be very confident she could handle this, she could win, and seemed to be shocked when she did not win. And then when the jury did not protect her as she saw it, did not believe her. So this is now her last experience, most likely, with the court system, with actually a trial as opposed to an appeal. And she is, at this point, she's decided that the judge hates her and he won't get off the case. She's decided that it's going to be very difficult to win because everybody is against her. And so it really does seem in her approach that her plan is just to move right ahead, doing and saying whatever she has in mind to do or say, regardless of the rulings of the court. She has the right to represent herself, easily go off the rails and move into her getting evidence in that the judge has ruled out of evidence. That can happen here because she seems to have no real sense that it would harm her if she did that. Like, what's the consequence to her? She's already in prison for life. She's already got multiple sentences on top of that. There's no way she's getting out. Why not say and do what she wants? And up until now, I think all the way through her second trial with Charles Vallow, she really did seem to be somewhat constrained, not entirely, especially by a closing argument, but more constrained by what the judge was ruling. I don't really get that sense here. It seems like it's kind of different. So let's do some questions. If you have a question, if you would put question marks at the beginning, I would appreciate that, and that'll help me that will help me find your question here in the chat. And I did want to show our Marlon, we have two moderators here on the channel, Marlon and Mama Pinks. We are so grateful to them. And Marlon has gotten a new dog, Jerry, who is, we now believe, the most famous dog in all of the Netherlands. So let's see if I can get this to switch over. Did it work? No, it's not working. That happened earlier too. By the way, we did earlier. Well, I'm probably not gonna be able to show you. Let's see if I'll stop the screen sharing, pull it out and see if sharing it differently works. Yep, it did. It will. All right, there is Jerry, the most famous dog in the Netherlands, thanks to you. So there you have it. Jerry himself would like to say hello. And that is Marlon's new puppy. So I'll just pull that out. Let's remove that. There we go. Okay. So I am curious what you think about this, and I am interested in your opinions about the first day of trial, if you had a chance to see it. Kat wants to know, do you think Lori made headwind with her opening? Did she actually get anywhere with her opening? And the answer for that is not yet. But ironically, the number one thing that could help her in that, because there was very little she said that could help her, she got in a bunch of non-admissible evidence about how she was friendly with everybody and Brandon Boudreaux is crazy and he made up this in order to go after her. She got in some facts that probably won't come in evidence unless she testifies, because I can guarantee you Brandon's not going to say, Brandon didn't say that. The police detective isn't going to say that. So, I think for that reason, she did not manage to make any real inroads there. But the place where there is a risk of her making an inroad is with the sympathy. If they start to believe everybody's ganging up on poor little Lori Vallow Daybell, if they start to believe she's just really being attacked by the system and they come to her side. So we will see what happens on that score. The evidence seems so far quite strong from the prosecution. We will watch it develop. Brad, if you were prosecuting, would you be nice on objections for the jury? Or would you just take every shot you can? Nope, I would be so nice. I would bend over backwards. I would be trying desperately. I would have sidebars if I had to do it. I would try to get orders in advance. I would try to figure out what the consequences are going to be, because I really would not want to give the jury any reason to feel this sympathy for her. And so I would want to try to frame it so that there were as few objections as I could conceivably make. I would want to avoid that if I possibly could. And I do understand that there were times today when Trina K could not. She literally could not avoid that. Okay. Should they have objected more? I think not. I think less would be my view. Maria, what is your opinion about what motivates her to pursue this trial despite having nothing to lose? I don't know that she really has a choice. I mean, her alternative would be to accept some kind of plea deal. I don't know whether they even offered one to her, but assuming they did, how is that an advantage to her? She really might as well roll the dice and see if she can beat Brandon Boudreaux. I just don't see any downside for her. Maybe she loses, in which case absolutely no impact on her life. And if she wins, great, she got him and she won. And she can say to everybody back at the prison that I won on my own, even I was doing this all myself. Oh, Mama Pinks wants to know, who is the more patient judge, Lori Vallow's or Daryl Brooks's judge? I'll tell you what, Mama Pinks, that's hilarious. I personally felt like Daryl Brooks's judge did not keep good control of that courtroom, and I felt like she needed to do more. This judge is not putting up with anything so far. We will see whether, though, he can keep control of her. It's going to be very difficult. He doesn't have a lot of consequences. Somebody mentioned the shot belt, but I can't see the judge saying, that's inadmissible evidence. Shock her. I cannot imagine him saying that. I think that would put the judge in a lot of hot water. I think that would create a real problem on appeal. But so I don't know what he's going to do exactly. It's going to be very difficult. Janet, who has been a member for 15 months, thank you, Janet, is very impressed with Jerry, who looks very sweet and, by the way, has a really great smile, as some dogs do. Mama Pinks pointed that out. All right, so let's go back over here and see if there's some more questions. What would or could a judge do if an attorney refused to talk to them during a proceeding? Well, if it were an attorney, the judge could make a record, and then the judge could turn that over to the bar and or hold the attorney in contempt, which he could do for Lori Vallow Daybell. But what's that going to mean to her? If he says to her, you're held in contempt, if he gives her 30 days more, what does that matter to Lori, right? She's just like, okay, 30 days more on top of multiple lifetimes. I don't care. Now, the one place she maybe should care, remember, the judge has not sentenced her for Charles Vallow yet. But I think Lori probably do the maximum. We all know that. Why should I be nice to him? He hates me. So Rikeroo says, can advisory council talk about their experience once the trial is over? And can they be liable for any of her antics? So unless there's some kind of proof that they asked her to do something, suggested, proposed, something like that, then I just imagine they're just sitting there. They're not doing any of this. So I don't think they would have any responsibility for that. Now, if she suddenly testified that they insisted she do this, maybe that would be different, but that hasn't happened. I don't see any sense of them doing this. As far as whether they can talk about their experience, they can't share anything that was done in confidence with their client if they had communications. All of that is still going to be confidential. There could be things, though, they could talk about. For example, their interactions with the judge in open court or things like that. Those would be a little bit different. I doubt they will. Chances are that they will remain silent, suffer in silence. Bex asks, can the state ask for a mistrial and redo it after she's had some more time in that hellhole Arizona jail that she's talking about? Yes, Bex, in theory, they could. If she puts in evidence, they could ask for a mistrial. And that is a good point, actually, Bex. That's the one thing I can think of that she really doesn't want. She said she wants back in Idaho. She's pushed to go ahead and have this trial, just get it over with so she can go back to Idaho. So if the one consequence, it might have teeth for her, is this idea that if she continues to insist on putting in evidence and doing things she's told not to do or knows she should not do, then at that point, maybe the state asks for a mistrial and she has to stay in Arizona longer. Maybe that's all there is left. That's a pretty good one, though. Eminem, where would she be incarcerated? The expectation is that she'll be sent back to Idaho. So I don't know. One other thing, maybe the judge, if he gave her contempt, maybe he could keep her there in the prison locally. I don't know. Interesting question. All right. Amanda Lauren, what would happen if Lori refuses to participate in the trial? Well, then they would bring in the counsel who have shadowed her and are ready, supposedly anyway, to proceed with trial. They might ask for continuance. They probably would, but that's who would take over the trial if she literally refused to participate in it. Beth asking, what about Lori's new or latest motion to judge? I think it will suffer the same fate as the first motions, multiple motions to dismiss the judge. That nobody is going to dismiss the judge. That's not happening. It's not going to happen at any level. There may come a time if the case gets overturned that it gets down and it gets tried again, but nobody is going to say this judge can't even try the case. I cannot picture that from anybody. All right. Patty Brumfield, why has her niece not been charged? And that's a question many people are asking. What I'm going to do is break down some of the things that we know about Melanie or that were spoken about that. We'll do another video on that and we'll cover that in more detail, Patty. That's a really interesting question. That is one that Lori raised. Lori said, why am I being charged and Melanie's not here? She said, okay, Alex, he's dead, but where's Melanie? And interesting question. And clearly suggests there's been a break between the two of them. Beth says, it seems like the prosecutor is pretty aggressively leading the witness. Do you think Lori missed objections that she should have asserted? Most probably yes. Almost certainly yes. She last time she tried to object once to leading, and the judge said, no, you have that wrong. That's not leading. And ever since then, she just stopped objecting. That was in the last trial. So I think she does miss some that she really should. And that happened in the last trial too. Again, that would be cautious about as a prosecutor, because I would want I want the trial to be as clean as possible. I want the jury to view my treatment of the defendant as completely fair. So that's sort of what I think the aim should be. So hopefully that will be something we see. I have missed the last bit of the trial today. I've still got to catch up as I was preparing for tonight. So I have more to find out. So I'll see some of those objections that you're talking about. All right. Is Melanie on the witness list? Amy Brady asks. I'm not sure if she's on either witness list. Good question. Usually people put everybody on the witness list, including people they don't plan to call, just because it's a lot safer. If you put somebody on the list, you can always not call them. But if you don't put them on the list, you may not be allowed to, even if you really need them for something important. Dennis asks, I know that she is already in prison for life, but do you think she could be found guilty by reason of insanity? Not in this case, Dennis. And here's the reason for that, is that there was a finding that she was competent. She was actually evaluated. Her own lawyers, and boy, did this make her mad, her own lawyers asked for her to be evaluated to see whether or not she was competent to stand trial. And she was determined by 2 different psychiatrists to be able to stand trial, mentally competent. And that then allowed her to represent herself. So there's nothing in here that suggests, and I will say too, there's not been anything in her behavior at trial that suggests she's insane. There has been behavior that seems very intentional and directed and purposeful. She seems to be able to defend herself pretty well, not in the sense that she's an attorney, but in the sense that she knows that she wants a certain result and she's acting toward that end. So just my view. Jojo, is this another play by Lori to have a missing file to cross Brandon? She will file a motion due to mishandled files. I don't know what exactly is going on with that missing file, or whatever the investigator was supposed to bring, and then they didn't have it, so she couldn't cross-examine Brandon Boudreaux. Another possibility is that she wanted a little more time. Remember, she has been sick. Trial was delayed. She tried to get it delayed further. She didn't win on that. She didn't seem sick today. She seemed very able to handle the argument that she made. The opening statement that she made. So she seemed to be able to do that pretty effectively. But maybe she wanted a little more time on Brandon Boudreaux. That was a powerhouse first witness for the state to put out there. Maybe she just felt like she wasn't ready. I don't know. But in any event, they said her attorney also called the investigator, and for some reason he wasn't answering. So it wasn't just entirely made up by Lori, put it that way. Marcia wants to know, have you ever seen another defendant that can manipulate people like Lori, multiple people to murder? This is an unusual case, Marcia. This is one of the most manipulated. Yes, that would be one word. She is unique. We will just put it there. There have been several cases we've covered here on the channel that have been extreme. Well, Alex Murdaugh, I would put him in the extremely able to manipulate. When you think of how many people he managed to convince that he was on their side, and they gave him money and he took it away. So, but I tell you what, this has been quite a series of cases. We will continue throughout this trial to talk about both sides, and we will continue to say, as she is tried, we'll continue to look at both sides of that. So we do know the whole story, though. The jury won't. The jury won't know all of the things that we know from the other cases. All right. So why doesn't her co-counselor advise Lori of the rules? Peaches asks. I feel quite confident that her advisory council has advised her of the rules. And I know the judge has as well. And she's already been through one trial, so she knows them that way as well. I believe that what we're seeing is intentional. There may be moments in time when she looks at that and says, okay, yeah, that went a little too far as the judge is talking. But for the most part, she continues to read her script. Easily, that script could have been handed to her advisory council, and the advisory council could say, oh, don't do that, not this, say it this way instead. That, I guess that didn't happen, but I feel like she would have been advised of the rules and of what she should be doing. I feel like that actually will be something that happened. Rochelle, do you think she is also saying whatever she wants, trying to get the prosecutor to object, talking softly, trying to sound like a victim? There have been a lot of comments about her tone of voice and how soft and meek she sounded, particularly during opening statement. I have some friends who were at the trial, and they wrote me that it's been inconsistent, that sometimes she comes across as very strident, really harsh, and other times as, soft and meek. So I don't know what the jury will make of that. They may be confused by the end of that. But I do think that she is, I don't know if she's trying to get the prosecutor to object. I think it would be a mistake for the prosecutor to continue to object a lot. I think it's very important that the prosecutor hold back and allow to see. I mean, for one thing, how effective is it really going to be? I don't think it's going to be wildly effective. The one place where I feel like the prosecutor has to draw the line is when Lori puts in evidence that isn't in evidence and isn't going to be in evidence. That's where I think the prosecutor has to draw the line. Desert Rose wants to know, can he make her stay in Arizona? I don't think so. The plan is for her to go back to Idaho. I don't think much can say, well, just permanently we're going to keep you here, because Idaho convicted her first. That's the plan, to send her back. I don't think she'll be found not guilty by reason of insanity. That's not even a plea, and she's being allowed to represent herself. So, Julia, why weren't these two cases tried together? Well, I believe the idea was that they were separate events. They happened at separate times. There were separate patterns. It wasn't like there was a crime committed in the exact same way. These were different. Charles Vallow was killed in a home, in Lori's home, while picking up his child. The claim from Lori and Alex was it was self-defense. And here you've got Brandon Boudreaux shot at by a stranger opening the back window of a Jeep right outside his home. So they were just different. They weren't patterns. They didn't fit together. And courts are very careful to try to keep one case from bleeding into the other, because it can be very damaging for a defendant who is charged with more than one crime. The fact that the proof of one may bleed over and affect the other, and they're different. It is entirely possible that Lori Vallow Daybell conspired to kill Charles Vallow, did not conspire to kill Brandon Boudreaux. That's possible. And so the court had to entertain that. I think it was wise to separate those so that there was no risk that she was convicted because it just looks really bad. She was around a couple of different murders. This looks bad. So the court's about that. But there was talk about how he might allow the Charles Vallow conviction into this trial. Obviously, we don't have anything yet. And the only thing the prosecutor said in opening statement was she talked about an incident on July 11th. No reference to what it was, no reference to another death or Lori's husband dying that day, nothing. Neuropsych Zena, do you think this will result in a mistrial? I hope not. I hope not. We will see what happens. I don't think there's any risk of that right this minute. I don't think anywhere near that stage. So we'll just see as it moves forward what happens. Brad asking about videos of my cases. I don't videos from any of my cases. Interesting. Would be interesting though, huh? I would probably critique myself. Oh, I did that totally wrong. I should do that. That'd be a funny video, but I don't have any. So, all right, Jay, totally wrong objection. What was the attorney thinking there? Jay Swiss Miss. They are advisors. Are they technically acting as her counsel? No. And if not, then is she still their client? They are her advisory counsel. So they're still bound by rules that would apply to an attorney with a client, but they are not actually allowed to represent her. They can't stand up and make the argument for her. They can't stand up and ask the questions for her. She has to do that because she insisted on it. She said she wanted to be the one in charge of her own case. She wanted to do that. Stephanie wants to see our little dog died. I am sorry to say I don't have any animals. We had a golden doodle, wonderful little golden doodle named Scotty. He was so sweet. Great dog, loved everybody, absolutely everybody. He never met a person he didn't like. Just loved everyone. All right. Okay, so I'm looking for question marks at the beginning. Catherine, I think Melanie got an immunity deal in Idaho, didn't she? So that I've always been a little confused about that. Remember that when it came to Chad Daybell's trial, I don't think she showed up even at Lori's. She came to town and then she somehow got confused about when it was and she left, and then she wasn't around to be called. So her husband, Ian Pulowski, testified she did not. And then I believe that she was called or came at Chad Daybell's trial. I don't know if she got any kind of immunity, and I don't know if anyone will call her here, but I think a lot of people would like to know what she has to say, but I can certainly see a valid reason for her choosing to do that and to take the Fifth Amendment. I can certainly see that would be very wise. I'm sure her attorneys would tell her that exactly. Why would she do that? All right. Sunset Gazing wants to know, do you think the investigator got lost in the portal? Maybe that was it. Maybe that was it. Ended up in Idaho by accident in the corner of the Idaho cell. So maybe that's where the investigator is. We don't really know. All right. Well, we are following two cases at once. I don't really know how this is going to work at all. I have no idea. But Karen Reed's case is proceeding forward. I've got a video I'm going to drop on that tonight. You have got to see this video. You've got to see this video. So if you aren't a subscriber, hit the subscribe button, put on your notifications because you've got to see this video. I don't want to give it away. Should I give it away? Y'all are all like, give it away, give it away. Come on. Okay. So I asked ChatGPT about some of the a particular Karen Reed issue. And I think you'll be fascinated to know what ChatGPT thinks. So I'm about to drop that video, so you don't want to miss that. So Karen Reed's going forward. Lori Vallow Daybell is going forward. Give me your opinion. What do you think? Would love to hear from you about what you think. And be sure to hit subscribe. We are ever so close to 200,000. And so we would love your help to get there. And if you would hit the like button on your way out, that'll help the video get out to more people. Thanks to our moderators, Marlon and Mama Pinks. And I will see y'all tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern talking about some case. We will find out.